All right, folks. Happy Friday morning. Welcome to the PTI Nights Daily Show. Hope your morning is off to a great start. My name is Al. I'm happy to be your host today. Currently have the pleasure of serving as a faculty member here in our fitness athlete division. Fitness Athlete Friday, we talk all things CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, endurance athletes, everything related to the active individual who's out there taking care of their health and fitness in a regular routine. So Friday, Fitness Athlete Friday, what's coming your way course-wise from the fitness athlete division? We have Fitness Athlete Advanced Concepts starting next week. That's our level 2 course online. That course is sold out already. That course is taught twice a year. It's kind of the capstone course of our certification in clinical management of fitness athlete. The next cohort for that will be sometime in the winter, either January or February. So if you missed out on that, be sure to jump into the next cohort. You need to take Essential Foundations to jump into that course, and you can take the live course at any time in the sequence. Our next cohort of Essential Foundations is going to begin September 12th. That is 8 weeks online, all things barbell, the research supporting the use of the barbell, talking a little bit about programming, about today's topic, nutrition, talking about loading different special populations. So that is a wonderful entry-level course if all of this is kind of brand new to you. And then you can catch our live course out on the road. This weekend, Mitch will be down in Pittsburgh. Next weekend, he'll be in Columbus, Ohio. Joe Hanesco will be up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, up in Canada next weekend. And then getting into September, Mitch will be in Rome, Georgia, the weekend of September 17th and 18th. That same weekend, Zach Long will be in Victor, New York. And then the weekend of September 24th and 25th, Mitch will be back on the road down in Austin, Texas. So make sure you check us out, ptinice.com, for all those offerings. Okay, let's talk about today's topic. So this is directly following up yesterday's topic on Leadership Thursday about the justification for addressing lifestyle and exercise in the clinic with our patients. This is kind of a little bit deeper dive specifically into the diet and nutrition portion of the equation. So we have talked on this before a little bit on here. But when we discuss this at our live course, when we discuss this in Essential Foundations, we often get a lot of pushback that physical therapists should not be addressing this for a wide variety of reasons, that it's outside of our scope of practice, that people may have an eating disorder and we don't want to offend them or bring up some past trauma. And so the best way to address diet and nutrition is to just avoid it with patients, which here in the fitness athlete division, we couldn't be more opposed to that, as we really do believe that it's relevant to a lot of our patients. Whether we're talking about the fitness athlete, specifically here on Fitness Athlete Friday, those folks who are getting after it on an almost daily basis, or those patients who come in who may be sedentary, may have never thought of addressing diet and nutrition, who maybe think they know it's something they need to work on, but aren't sure where to start. There's a wide variety of reasons to be addressing this topic with people. First things first, this is what we talk about in Essential Foundations. This is what we talk about in our live seminar. This is totally within our scope of practice to address. What you can specifically do and what you can specifically discuss and recommend is going to depend, unfortunately, on your state, as physical therapy is regulated on a state-by-state basis. But most of us can at least discuss very broad recommendations about, I think you aren't eating enough food. I think you are eating too much food. I think you're not getting enough protein. I think you're not getting enough water. We can offer kind of very broad recommendations in pretty much every state. Some states will control how specific you can get, that you cannot recommend a specific diet. You cannot tell somebody that they need to do intermittent fasting or they should do keto. You can't recommend a specific dietary plan. And some states will not let you, for example, give somebody macronutrients to follow or to take their body fat with calipers or another more advanced test. But in general, we should feel confident that our scope of practice, there's an APTA white paper on this as well that says we should be addressing this. As we talked about yesterday, there's some very interesting research looking at primary care physicians and physical therapists and asking them, do you believe it's important to address this in the clinic? Both groups saying yes. And then asking, are you addressing this, with primary care physicians answering, no, physical therapists address this, and physical therapists saying, no, primary care physicians address this, and finding that really nobody is addressing this with patients. Now, patients are used to getting general recommendations like we talked about yesterday. Go walk more. They're used to getting those same kind of lazy recommendations about diet and nutrition. Hey, I think you need to lose some weight. I think you need to gain some weight, without any really advice on what that looks like. Obviously, a lot of folks have probably tried a lot of different things with minimal or no success. That kind of explains our culture in a nutshell. People are very used to trying the next fad diet or the next crash diet, or the next best type of exercise, that sort of thing. But we can be a little bit more judicious in giving specific recommendations and helping them find out what the issue might be and working towards a solution if that meets their goal. So know that it's within our scope of practice to discuss. I would argue, be mindful of the time you have with the patient. When you have that hour, is the best use of your time, even if you're allowed to where you live, take their weight, take their body waist taping, take their 3-site caliper test. Is that the best use of your time as a physical therapist? I would argue no. I find that stuff to be very boring. I find it to be expensive, right? We are an expensive line of practice to see compared to somebody like a nutrition coach. We should definitely have a list of people in our back pocket to refer those people to if they specifically want to get a little bit more dialed in and get into things like that. I don't think that's the best use of our time, but I do think this is something we should be addressing in the clinic. So that being said, we know there are issues on both sides of the spectrum, that we have some really good research. We shared an infographic a couple weeks ago about a paper that just came out from Pearson and Jenkins, looking specifically at dietary intake in the CrossFit population and finding what those of us who are coaching in the CrossFit population, who have worked in a more nutrition specific area of CrossFit for a while, we already know this, but it was good to see the research on it, that finding when we asked CrossFitters what they were eating, we found that both men and women are on average under eating, that men who participate in CrossFit are on average eating as low as 1,300 calories a day and about 80 grams of protein, not nearly enough food or protein to support even daily life, let alone vigorous high intensity exercise, and finding women eating a little bit less, about 1,100 calories or 20 grams of protein a day. So again, not enough fuel, right? Finding that active individuals tend to be underfueled. We also have research on food logs and diet journals that find that folks tend to underreport their food when we look at research on weight loss studies, up to 2,000 calories a day, which is quite a variance, right? 2,000 calories a day across 7 days is 14,000 calories. That's about 4 pounds-ish of body mass per week underreporting. So when we have those individuals who say, I'm watching what I eat, I'm keeping a journal, I just can't seem to lose weight, I'm maybe even am still gaining weight, we know that the fault there is probably the underreporting, and that we find this continuum that is maybe a false logic continuum, that we see somebody who is overweight and we assume that they're probably overeating, that's why they're overweight, and that we see folks who are in good shape, however you might define that, they look normal, at least body composition wise, and we assume those folks, to maintain that physique they have, must be under eating. But when we find folks who are interested in losing weight, what we often find is they're not overeating, they're likely very much so under eating. They might be the person who is eating 800 calories a day, and they are finding they can't lose weight because they're basically starving themselves. Their body is holding on to whatever weight they have left because they're in such an extreme caloric deficit. And on the other side of the continuum, those folks who we see, how do they keep their physique? They must be starving themselves. Actually, those folks are probably eating a lot of food, right? Muscle mass creates a really high metabolism overall. And finding folks who are active, who have a lot of muscle mass, are probably eating much more calories than we would think. They're probably definitely clearing 2,000 calories a day. Some of those folks, much more active, much more levels of body mass, might be eating 2,500, 3,000, 3,500, 4,000 calories a day to maintain that level of muscle mass. My basal metabolic rate now, starting CrossFit 5 years ago, 1,800 calories a day was my maintenance calorie, the level at which I did not gain or lose weight. It is now 3,200 calories a day to maintain my weight. So as we see folks become more active, they need to eat more food to maintain that. And that can be where a lot of active folks run into trouble. And folks who are trying to lose weight, that could be where they run into trouble. We're thinking creating just such a caloric deficit, that will be the key to losing weight. And we know that's not the case. I love what our nutrition coach at the gym, Billy, says, eat more to burn more, that we often need to bring those people up in calories to actually facilitate some weight loss. So it's a really big logical fallacy to assume that overweight people are overeating, and that folks with a good body composition, a high level of muscle mass, are starving themselves to be where they're at. It often can be the opposite. And that brings me to the most important point of today is you can't measure, you can't change what you don't track, right? Having the data is so important. There's such a big shift now on social media away from tracking food and this pendulum swing towards intuitive eating. And while I recognize that tracking food is not for everybody, if your patient is coming to you and you think it is an issue with either their progress in rehab or they voice that it's a goal for them to lose or gain weight, whatever their goal might be, we have to start getting clean data. We know we can't just go by, I think I eat okay. That's not helpful, right? That's the same as a pharmacist prescribing some blood pressure medication. Well, how much? What drug? What's the dosage? How many times a day? We need to be much more specific, if only for a short period of time, to understand where those people are at. And I think you'll find that if you start integrating this into practice, you'll be really amazed in an unfortunate way at what people are eating, especially those active individuals, those folks who just can't seem to shake those symptoms. What is going on? If you dig deeper into the nutrition, if you really dig in that initial evaluation and your follow-up visits, I think you'll find that they're probably under eating, especially protein. That's a theme that we come and see, that those tendinopathy symptoms are just not clearing up. That chronic back pain is just not going away. We're loading them in the clinic. We're doing our eccentrics, we're doing manual therapy and isometrics and everything else we have to reduce that person's pain, but it just doesn't carry over and it just seems to be lingering. Often lifestyle, all the other stuff outside of the clinic, all the other stuff outside of exercise seems to be the key. I remember having a patient not too long ago, a gentleman in his mid 40s, very active person, very good runner, competitive runner, running between 5 to 10 miles a day, 6 days a week, and could just not shake some hamstring tendinopathy going on. No matter what we did, it was still low grade, saw some initial improvements, but plateaued quite early on. Asking him in his initial evaluation, what does your dietary intake look like? Well, I eat 3 meals a day and I have a snack before I run. I don't feel hungry. I think I'm doing pretty good. And if we just stop there, if we say, okay, this guy seems to have it under control, nothing to see here, asking him, hey, keep a log or download MyFitnessPal or any of the other tracking apps out there. And this isn't a judgment thing. This isn't to make fun of what you eat, but we really need to get an objective number to make sure that this isn't a problem. And he was very much on board with it. And him coming back after a week and showing me his MyFitnessPal data was really eye-opening. Of his breakfast was an English muffin with honey. His lunch was a can of tomato soup. His pre-workout snack was a Kind bar, and then his dinner was some chicken and steamed broccoli. And finding this gentleman eating about 800 calories a day and about 20 grams of protein, which really falls in line with that study we referenced earlier of under eating, especially of protein, and bumping him up, giving him some targets for the next week over week in therapy, not immediately ramping him from 800 calories to 2,000 calories or 3,000 calories, but hey, over this next week, I want you to shoot for 100 calories. Let's shoot for 50 grams of protein. And week over week, his homework, aside from his HEP for therapy, began to slowly add some food in, slowly add some protein in, make sure that his GI system could adjust to it. And finding after a couple of weeks, as he neared 2,000 calories, as he neared his body weight in protein, he really started to report, I can't really feel my hamstring symptoms anymore. So it's definitely a factor with our active individuals. And it can be a factor with those folks too, who are looking to make a lifestyle change, that you will only lose so much weight eating 800 calories a day. You're going to reach a point where probably you need to start eating more in addition to increasing your activity level if weight loss is a goal for you. So making sure that if only for a little while we track, and also telling those people, hey, as you continue to exercise, the natural course of action, if you're feeling enough, is that you're going to see body composition changes. You're going to add more muscle mass. The benefit of that is you get more wiggle room in your diet for having stuff like ice cream and birthday cake, but it also boosts your metabolism. And we need to make sure that we're trying to check in every so often to continue to increase your caloric intake so we don't end up in the situation again where you're a very active individual who is underfueled. So recognizing that if we're doing everything right, over time, our metabolism should continue to increase, which is nice. We get that wiggle room, but we have to account for that to make sure that we don't accidentally put ourselves in a situation where we are again under fueling and maybe having some musculoskeletal symptoms. My last point is, I know this is a sensitive issue. Just like anything else in the clinic, motivational interviewing 101. If the patient does not seem like they want to do this, if they seem reluctant to make this change, if for whatever reason they're not on board, we don't just steamroll over them, right? It's the same way with dry needling or spinal manipulation. Hey, I'd love to do this needling technique with you, Francine. Oh, I hate needles. I'm going to pass out. Well, we don't force that person onto the table and needle them anyways. We find a different way. So the same is happening with dietary intervention, that if somebody just does not seem to be on board, then we do everything else we can aside from that, and maybe revisit it later when maybe they're a little bit more open to change. I loved being in extremity management this past weekend with Lindsay and Kristen up in Rochester, Minnesota, and hearing Lindsay giving the tendinopathy lecture, talking about the importance of lifestyle and managing tendinopathies, and admitting herself, hey, listen, this can be a tough area for some people to get their nutrition under control. There can be a lot of factors in their life that limit them from wanting to make this change, from being able to make this change, and sharing her own story how she's been doing CrossFit for almost 7 years now and is just now to the point where she's ready to actually make a change and intervene from a diet and nutrition standpoint in her lifestyle. That up until this point, she was not willing to restrict the stuff she liked to eat. She was not willing to track her food or get her body fat assessed or anything like that. I think that those people are out there, and we need to be respectful of that, whether or not they've had some past trauma with an eating disorder. That being said, if this is you and you're the practitioner who has had a trauma with this in the past, you cannot let your previous bias affect your interventions with your patient. If you do not like to talk about diet and nutrition because you've had issues in the past and you believe that to be an issue with this patient, then you are not the provider of choice for that patient. You need to refer that patient to somebody else in the clinic. You need to get them to maybe a sports psychologist or therapist that you know in the area, or a nutrition coach, so that they can get the help they need if it can't come from you because you aren't willing to address this. We need to recognize our own limitations. We can't let our biases influence our care with these patients, right? I'm currently dealing with a little bit of low back pain with radiculopathy. I'm not enjoying bending forward right now or lifting from the ground. But that means I still need to address those things with patients, get them back to bending forward, picking up stuff from the ground. I can't let my bias of what's currently going on with me affect my treatment and say, I don't think you should lift from the floor ever again. That's obviously not the correct choice. So we can't let our biases affect our treatment. So if you're not the provider of choice, we need to be astute and recognize that that's not us, and refer those patients to somebody who can. We're lucky here. We have a really great therapist in the next town over who's a CrossFitter, who has had experience with disordered eating in the past. She's a fantastic resource for us. We're also really blessed to have a great nutrition coach here who has a really unique, individualized approach to nutrition for folks who are ready to take that next step and make some changes, gaining weight, losing weight, whatever, with our patients, that we can refer over to him on the gym side of the house. I think it's really important to have an individualized approach, not only from physical therapy, but from nutrition as well with these patients. That so many of these patients are used to getting some sort of template from some box program online where they are given a set number of calories to eat, and the only metric they're using is calories in and weight on the scale. And I think that's a really rough way to approach it, because it's much more than that. It's much more important than the weight on the scale. It's important how our body fat and our lean muscle mass is changing. So find that person in your community. They're definitely out there. Develop a relationship with them, and start sending some of your patients that way who are looking to take it a little bit more serious. And you'll be surprised how many people come back the next way, the way back from the nutrition coach as well, when those clients come in and say, well, I was doing pretty good in the gym, but I tweaked my shoulder or something. It's really nice to have a two-way relationship with the nutrition coach in your community. So remember, this is within our scope to discuss. The research would say it's not being addressed by the healthcare system enough with patients. Folks are just being given really general recommendations that are not helpful. We know it's an issue. We know often our healthier folks, when they have some symptoms that just don't seem to be going away, it can often be that they're under eating, especially under eating protein. That folks who are coming in and saying, I've been trying to lose weight for years, often those folks are under eating as well. They are simply having too much of a calorie deficit to really make any sort of forward progress. And actually increasing that person's food intake can be helpful in jumpstarting the weight loss process again. Be respectful of patients if they just don't seem to be willing or ready to make this change, or they do have past trauma. If you have your own past trauma, don't put that onto your patients. You still need to address diet and nutrition with these patients. If you can't or aren't willing to do that, recognize that you're not the provider of choice for that patient and that you need to refer them to somebody who is, and have those resources available in your community, those sports psychologists, those therapists, and those nutrition coaches who are used to addressing this stuff on a daily basis and who have the training and experience to do so. So I hope this was helpful. I'm happy to hear any discussion that comes from this. I hope if you're at the CrossFit Games, you have a great weekend. I hope if you'll be joining us at a live course this weekend, you'll have a great time and have a great weekend. Have a wonderful Friday. Bye, everybody.